Let's begin. We are on Daf Yud Aleph Amud Aleph, page 11a, all the way at the bottom. And we have been discussing the question of one separating themselves from food or drink. Is that considered an act of holiness, or is it a sin? Is it against the Torah, or is it something that the Torah would want? Is it something that Hashem wants? Is this a good thing or a bad thing to fast? And the interesting thing is, it's really a machlokes in the in Shulchan Aruch. There's the Shulchan Aruch opinion, and then there's the Rambam's opinion. So it's among the Poskim there seems to be an argument if we follow Shmuel or Rabbi Elazar. But our Gemara has two opinions. And our Gemara is discussing these opinions about fasting, if it's considered something positive or negative. Now we are up to 11a, and in the art scroll, it's 11a4. But before we continue, I just wanted to mention Teves. Teves here does have a question. So let's get the names straight of the opinions about fasting, if it's good or bad. So we have an opinion here of Shmuel. And Shmuel said that fasting is considered a chote, a sinner. Person who fasts is considered a sinner. Right? That was the opinion of Shmuel. And we had another opinion of Rabbi Elazar. And Rabbi Elazar said he's called a kadosh, someone who's holy. So we have these two opposite views, seemingly opposite views. And as I mentioned, there seems to be an argument among the halachic codifiers as well, who to follow. Do we follow Shmuel or do we follow Rabbi Elazar? But let's just talk about these opinions themselves in the Gemara. So we have Shmuel's opinion that it's not a good thing to fast. You're called a sinner, and the Gemara goes through back and forth. What's the source, and what does the other opinion hold? And there seems to be sources for each of them. So how do they answer each other's sources? And then the Gemara says that the Gemara then goes into Rabbi Elazar's opinion, and it turns out that Rabbi Elazar ends up holding that there's a difference between if a person is capable of fasting or if he's not capable of fasting. But if he's capable of fasting, according to Rabbi Elazar, it's considered a very praiseworthy thing. Now, if he's not able to fast, then even Rabbi Elazar seems to agree that it's not appropriate. That's Rabbi Elazar. So Rabbi Elazar seems to have this sort of like both. He sort of like sees it both ways. He's very understanding of fasting. That on the one hand, he does call the person holy, but on the other hand, he does say that if a person can't handle it, then it's considered, it's going to affect them, their health. It's going to affect them, their concentration, their ability to serve Hashem properly. So then, he backs that down and he says, okay, and such a person actually should not be fasting. But Shmuel seems to imply that even someone who can fast should not fast. That's what the opinion. In other words, now that we found Rabbi Elazar's view, that he basically differentiates between someone who can fast and someone who can't. So that sheds light on Shmuel's view, who's arguing with him, And Shmuel basically is saying that you're not allowed to fast, and which would mean even in a case where you can, you still shouldn't. Now, Taisvis over here on page 11a, Taisvis is bothered with a strong question. He says there's a Gemara that says, Gemara in Baba Kama, it says that Shmuel holds that a person is allowed to wound themselves. Now, this is a surprising statement according to Jewish law. Generally, we say that you're not allowed to cause yourself any harm. A person's not allowed to, you allowed to, in fact, there's all discussion about, is a person allowed to have electoral surgery? Let's say you feel that your nose is a little too long and you want to cut it a drop shorter. And medically, there's no need for you to cut it shorter, but you figure, listen, it's a little long. I'd like to have less of a less lengthy of a little shorter nose and look nicer and look more handsome. So I'm wondering about cutting it short. Are you allowed to do that? There's discussion among the poskim, under what circumstances would you be allowed to? Because according to regular halacha, it would sound like you shouldn't, because you're not allowed to wound yourself, and that would be wounding oneself. And of course, if it involves a person's emotional state and they're depressed and there's a lot of discussion about it, of what scenario would allow it. But under normal circumstances, person shouldn't really do things like that. You're wounding yourself. In fact, there's a explanation by the Rebbe. The Lubavitcher Rebbe has an explanation of why Avraham did not circumcise himself before he was commanded to. He waited till Hashem commanded him at the age of 99. Hashem told him, circumcise yourself. What about everything else Avraham did all his life? He did all the mitzvahs. He didn't wait for Hashem to tell him, keep Shabbos. He still kept Shabbos. He didn't wait for Hashem to tell him to daven. He davened. He didn't wait for Hashem to tell him to do all these things. Why did Avraham wait to circumcise himself? One of the answer that the Lubavitcher Rebbe gives is that he's not allowed to circumcise himself. Circumcision is wounding. You're wounding your body. You don't own your body. Hashem does. You have no right to hurt it. It's in fact, it's like stealing, I guess. It would fall under the category of wounding your body. You have no right to wound your body. So Shmuel has this surprising view in the tractate Baba Kama, that he says a person is allowed to wound themselves. And of course, the Gemara has to explain and qualify what that means, because you're really not allowed to wound yourself. So the Gemara explains that what it means is, what he means is you're allowed to fast. So that's his explanation. You're wounding yourself. I mean, you're allowed to hurt yourself in a sense that you could fast. Are you allowed to cut yourself? No. You wouldn't be allowed to wound yourself in that way, but you would be allowed to fast, even though it's some level of wounding oneself. A person's allowed to do that. Now, how does that fit with our Gemara here, where it says that Shmuel says if you fast, you're called a sinner? It seems like a clear out contradiction. This is over there he says you're allowed to fast, and here he says you're a sinner. If a person sits and fasts, he is called a sinner. And there he says Rishai, he's allowed to. So Taisus over here asked this question. Taisus answers that he says something very interesting. He says, if a person has a bad dream on Shabbos, are they allowed to fast? We know that fasting is supposed to be very beneficial to a bad dream. Person has a bad dream, they fast, it's supposed to atone for the bad dream, and it removes the decree that might be hovering over the person. And so fasting is very beneficial to a dream. What happens if you have a dream on Shabbos? Shabbos, you're not allowed to fast. So the law is that you would be allowed to fast of a dream on Shabbos. You're allowed to. But you're also sinning. You're doing a small sin of fasting on Shabbos, but you're doing a big thing, a big mitzvah to fast because you're removing a tragedy possibly from happening to you or to your family or to whoever your bad dream was about. You're fasting, so you're doing something good, but you're also doing something bad. And the law is that because you're going to need to atone for your sin of, of fasting, we tell you fast, but then atone for it by fasting during the week. You'll take on another fast, and that will atone for fasting on Shabbos. And fasting on Shabbos was a small sin, but it also carried with it an important element of fasting to remove a bad dream, and that is acceptable. So Teves says that is the opinion of Shmuel here with regard to fasting, that even though fasting itself in general is considered something negative, but there is also something positive that comes out from fasting. So he says,
also, Rabbi, what makes it interesting is that it's Shmuel saying it.
Right,
Shmuel
right. The doctor, right. Right. Yeah, I was thinking about that earlier. So Shmuel is telling us that for sure he's considered a sinner, and that has to do with a kal v'chomer, an a priori argument from Nazir. If a Nazir is only separating himself from wine, he's considered to have sinned. For sure, someone who separates themselves from all things. So definitely there's a sin there. But nevertheless, he says, the mitzvah that he's doing by fasting is much greater than the Avera that he is limiting himself from these foods. So he really gives us a spin on the view of if it's good or bad to fast. So we've got Rabbi Elazar telling us that it's a good thing to fast, and you're holy. And the only time that it's not good, Rabbi Elazar says, is if a person can't handle it, but otherwise considered holy. And Toy says, even Shmuel says that it's a good thing to fast. It's a very positive thing to fast because it's a mitzvah that you're doing by fasting is gadol yoser minhu avera. It's even greater than the avera. So Shmuel seems to agree a little with this opinion. I'm just saying, like, now if we want to understand the views, we sort of we have to take Teves into consideration because it changes our understanding of Shmuel's view of if fasting is a good thing or a bad thing. Until now, we understood Shmuel to be pretty set in his way that fasting is considered a sin. But with Teves, it now changes our perspective, our understanding of what Shmuel holds. So we have Rabbi Elazar who's saying that it's you're considered holy. Shmuel is also saying it's a very big mitzvah, but it carries with it an element of sin because what you're doing is something similar to a Nazir, maybe even worse than a Nazir, and it's considered a choite. You have a smaller sin. You have a bigger mitzvah of fasting, but you also have a small sin, and it's similar to the case of a person who fasts on Shabbos. He gives that example. That person who fasts on Shabbos, well, it tears up their decree, but they do have to, they will get punished for fasting on Shabbos unless the way around that is to fast another fast day that will atone for fasting on Shabbos. Just make sure the second fast day is not on Shabbos. And this way you'll atone for fasting on Shabbos. So what it sounds like from Teves is that it's a good thing, and the good thing is even greater than the negative thing of fasting. The question is, so what does Taisus understand? How does Taisus understand Shmuel? If we ask someone, if we ask like, what is Shmuel's opinion? Is it should I fast or shouldn't I fast? It's a little vague. On the one hand, it's a bigger mitzvah to fast, but it's considered a sin as well. But on Shabbos, we tell you you should fast and you should atone for your sin. So is that what we would say here as well? In other words, would Shmuel encourage someone to fast? I mean, from the Gemara, the wording of the Gemara, it sounds like no. It's called a chayte. But from the way Tosfos explains it and says it's similar to Shabbos, there's room to say maybe he's saying it's a good thing. It's a little surprising because the beginning words of Tosfos is Vadai havi chayte. For sure, he's considered a sinner. You're allowed to fast. Even the wording in Hachovel, in the chapter in Baba Kama, where he says this, he uses the word Rishoy. He's allowed to be choivel biatzma, to wound himself, which would mean fasting. So and he uses this word for sure. He's considered a choite, a sinner. But nevertheless, the mitzvah that he does, the fast, is greater than the avera. From this, that he's mitzvah himself. It sounds, at least the way I'm learning Tosfos, the way I understand Tosfos, is that Shmuel, if you ask Shmuel, should I fast or not? They'll tell you don't fast. But there is, if you do fast, you did do a mitzvah that might be greater than the sin, but you still shouldn't do it. In the case of Shabbos, although Tosfos does give that as an example, that is a case where you sort of like need to. But here, the term used is Rishoy, he's allowed to, and Vadei Choite, he's definitely sinning. I don't know, to me, and also, how is he going to be different than Rabbi Elazar? If he would say you should fast, and Rabbi Elazar says you should fast, it sounds like maybe they both agree, and the Gemara implies like they're arguing. So it would seem to me like if you ask Shmuel, should I fast or not? My thought is based on this that based on the wording of Tosfos that maybe not, even though it's a bigger mitzvah to fast. But who told you have to? Who said you should? In other words, with Shabbos you have to. You have no choice. You need to atone. You need to get rid of this dream. But here, just because this is a bigger mitzvah, and that's a smaller sin, there's nothing pushing you to do that sin. Anyway, just a thought, deserves some research. This is a complicated Tosfos, but it does change our perspective on the opinions of Shmuel and the argument between Shmuel and Rebbe Elazar. Okay, we're going to start on the bottom line. Umi Amar Rebbe Elazar Hachi. So we're on page 11A, the bottom line. 11A. In the art scroll, it's 11A4, the last paragraph there. So the Gemara says, Umi Amar Rabbi Elazar Hachi. Does Rabbi Elazar does he really say this? That what? That it is a person who fasts is considered good, it's considered he's kadosh, he's holy. Does Rabbi Elazar really say such a thing? V'ya Amar Rabbi Elazar, doesn't Rabbi Elazar say that the olam yamad adam atzmai, person should always consider himself ki'ilu kadosh sharui b'soich meyav, as if his innards are holy, and you're not allowed to hurt them, weaken them. You're not allowed to fast. Again, Rabbi Elazar was the opinion that it's a good thing to fast. And here the Gemara says, but Rabbi Elazar seems to contradict himself where he says, let me mute everyone. I'm not sure what that is. Okay. So Rabbi Elazar says that a person should consider himself as if there's holiness inside his innards. B'soich meyav. And what that would mean is that you're not allowed to hurt your innards. It's holy. And the pasuk he brings, Shenemar, as it says in a pasuk, B'kir b'cho kadosh. inside in your innards, in your midst. But it means we're translating to mean bekirbacha, inside you is kadosh, it's holy. V'loi avoi ba'ir, and I will not come to the city. This is a verse we've talked about this pasuk before. Now, how do you translate the pasuk? So the different ways of translating, commentaries discuss how he's exactly translating it. But one way of translating it is B'kirbacha Kadosh, inside your midst is holy. V'loi avoi ba'ir, and if you weaken it, Hashem says, I will not come. I will not come to you. I will not. You're sort of like kicking me out. I'm not going to be. I'm not interested in coming if you're going to fast and hurt yourself. Another way of translating is B'kirbacha Kadosh, if you separate yourself, your innards from food. B'kirbacha Kadosh, if you cause your insides to be holy, meaning separated from food, Lo Yavai Ba'ir, I won't come to your city. And basically, the point is that he seems to say that you should not be fasting. So the Gemara answers, and this is the answer. I believe we might have just done this one little piece on the day before we finished, the day before Hanukkah, the day before our break, that we concluded, like kasha, it's not a contradiction. This is if he's able to cause himself pain. Here is if he's not able to cause himself pain, and if he's not able to cause himself pain, so then he shouldn't be doing this. If he's able to, he could handle it, then it's considered holy. But if he can't, he is not supposed to do that. It's kirbacha kadosh v'loy avoi ba'ir. I will not come to the city. If you do it, it's not something that I want, and therefore don't fast if you can't handle it. And we'll see a little while. The Gemara also mentions about a teacher, a scholar. If he's allowed to fast, is it going to cause him to diminish his service of Hashem, his serving Hashem properly? Can a worker fast? If it's going to weaken him, he's not going to give his full strength. These are halachic questions that either they involve both laws of Urachayim or Yeridea, the laws of how a teacher is supposed to act, but they also involve laws of Chosh and Mishpat, monetary laws of stealing. Because if you are not your full strength and you're officially hired to work for someone, and you don't eat breakfast, or you don't eat or sleep properly, so this could be a question of stealing as well, stealing from the from your work, because you're taking a salary and you're not giving the full your full strength that you should. I mean, I guess every place expects you to have a few days that you're not gonna don't perform as good as others, but I guess there's a limit, and if you do it willingly, there's a difference between doing it willingly and and how often you're doing it. So this does create a question again. If a person wants to be honest with himself, with his work, is he cheating them? So here, Rabbi Elazar is just talking about himself. Now, forget about work. Are you able to fast, or you're not able to fast? If it's going to affect you in a negative way, and then you shouldn't be fasting. Not, then Rabbi Elazar holds you're praiseworthy. Shmuel, we have to figure out, is it, according to it seems that it's still a mitzvah rabbah. It's like a mitzvah, it's a mitzvah gadol yosef, excuse me. He says it's a mikol makam, and mitzvah is greater than the avera. The mitzvah is greater than the avera, and he also mentions this point that it's a mitzvah to make a neder. Like it says, a person who sees a soita in her situation of disgrace, where the soita is this woman who questionable if she cheated on her husband and she entered a secluded area with another man, but we don't know if she sinned with him. So this person who sees her and so he should separate himself from wine because uh, wine caused her to get into this situation, and then he sees her, if he sees her uh, uh, having to go through this whole ceremony and sees her explode, so he should separate himself from wine because wine is what brought her to reach this situation, to reach where she did, because she was lightheaded, so to speak. She was acting in a frivolous way or whatever that caused her to do such a sin. So you see that there is a concept that a person should make a neder. So there is a sort of like a mitzvah. There's a element of a positive element to it. But anyway, the bottom line is that we have here Rabbi Elazar saying that there are some people that shouldn't, even though it's kadosh. If you do, there are some people shouldn't, and then we had Shmuel, who it's a little unclear if it's someone should or shouldn't. But one place he says it's a chayte, you're a sinner. Question, but there's also the mitzvah is greater than the sin, and that's Shmuel's view. Now Reish Lakish now comes along, and here we have Reish Lakish, who says, we'll see there's an argument here between Rashi and Teves, but the Reish Lakish Amar, continue in the Gemara. Reish Lakish says, Reish Lakish Amar Nikra Chassid, that a person who, we'll do Rashi's first, person who fasts is called a chassid. If a person fasts, they are called a chassid. Shenem, as it says, goimel nafshoy ish chesed. Goimel nafshoy, that if a person fasts, that's the way Rashi is translating this word, goimel nafshoy, that he separates himself, just like higomel could mean a person is weaned. So here also he weans himself from food, so to speak. He separates himself from food. Is goimel nafsha. This is a pasuk ish chassid. He's a person who's considered like a chesed. He's considered like a chassid, and because he's separating himself from wine. So not only is he called kadosh, he's called a chassid. Rashi gives another way of translating the word goimel nafshay, that that means that he that another way of translating the word to mean that he's not eating, that he's fasting. Taisus doesn't agree with this, and he says that translated the opposite way, that goimel nafshay means he does a kindness to himself that he doesn't fast. In other words, not fasting is considered a chassid. So according to Taisus, Reish Lakish Amar, Reish Lakish says that that not it's not good to fast. Not only it's not good to fast, but in other words, the Gemara previously said, Rabbi Elazar says that a person should consider himself as if he has holiness in his midst, in his innards, and he shouldn't pain them. And Shlakish continues on that statement, so to speak, and he says, not only you shouldn't pain your innards, but you're even called a chassid by not fasting, because you're goimel nafshay if you do kindness to your soul by not fasting, as the goimel normally would mean doing kindness to it by eating. Rashi had to sort of struggle to figure out how goimel could mean to fast, but Taisus wants to translate it more simply. Goimel nafshay does an act of kindness to himself. In other words, he eats. So goimel nafshay is called a chassid. And the pasuk continues, and it says The oicher she'eroi, a person who destroys his body, is considered. And let me see what the end of that pasuk is. The end of that pasuk is achzari, is considered cruel. It's a pasuk in Proverbs. So the question on the end of the pasuk is sort of like seems to be a contradiction, at least according to the way Rashi learns it. Think about it. The way Taanis learns that pasuk, it actually fits very well. Goimel nafshe ish chased or ish chesed, person who does kindness to himself, he's considered a chassid or kind person, good person. He's feeding himself. He's not hurting himself. Feeding himself. That's kind. And a person who pains his body, destroys his body, he's an achzari. He's cruel. So that fits, according to Taanis, very well. Don't fast. If you feed yourself, you're considered a chassid. Not fasting is a good thing. It's a good thing not to eat, not to fast. So, in other words, it sounds like he's following the opinion of Shmuel, and taking it even a step further. Not only is he a sinner if he fasts, but if you don't fast, you're called a chassid. So he's now, but in the end of the pasuk says, and if you do fast, you're considered cruel, achzari. So that fits very well according to Taanis. According to Rashi, he struggles to translate goimel nafshe means he fasts. He fasts. He's called a chassid by fasting. So then, what does the end of the pasuk mean? If you destroy your body, you're considered cruel. What do you mean? You just said that you're considered good if you fast. You just said goimel nafshe means that you wean yourself from food. You're called a chassid. And then the pasuk continues, and it seems to contradict itself. It says, the person who is destroying his flesh, he's considered cruel. So the commentaries try to explain. Rashi himself seems to contradict himself because he translates it to mean a person who fasts and he weakens his body. He's called cruel. What do you mean? You just translated that you should fast. So Rashi himself is sort of a major contradiction, and the commentaries explain that basically he's following the opinion of Rav Elazar, who just explained that there are two types of people. There are people who can handle a fast and people who can't, and that pasuk is basically following that way of thinking and that perspective, and that a person who can handle it a fast, then he is considered a chassid. Not only is he doing he's called a kadosh according to Rabbi Elazar, it's called a chassid. And additionally, a person can't, then you're called an achzor. If you can't handle it, you're actually called an achzor. So that's the way they translate. That's the way they explain it according to Rashi, how it's not a contradiction, the beginning of the pasuk and the end of the pasuk. Okay, now we're going to continue. And the Gemara now mentions about a person who is a yeshiva student, a bar beirav. Beirav means like yeshiva, and bar beirav means like the yeshiva student. So Amar Rav Sheshes said, Amar Rav Sheshes says, Hi bar beirav, the Yosef Batainisa. There was a student of a yeshiva, this student of a yeshiva who fasts. So Leichol Kalba Lishe Ruse. A dog should eat his meal. And the meaning of this, that Leichol Kalba Lishe Ruse. So the point is that Rav Sheshes is saying that it's not really helpful to him if he fasts. It's similar to if a dog ate his meal and he just doesn't have food, doesn't help him. It's not good for him. A bar beirav that fasts, a shiva student that fasts, it's not beneficial to him. It's not adding mitzvahs to him, and it's basically like a dog ate his meal, and He's yeah, okay, you fasted, but you're not getting any reward for it. It's not good for it's not something that's not something positive. There is discussion of what we're talking about. Is this talking about someone who could handle a fast, or is it someone who can't handle a fast? There is such a discussion about this statement, how to interpret it based on the previous differentiation between someone who could handle it or someone can't handle it. But anyway, the Gemara continues and it says, Amar Reb Yirmiyah bar Abba, Ein Taanis Tzibur beBavel, Ella Tisha B'Av Bilbad. Reb Yirmiyah bar Abba now says that the public fasts in Babylon is only Tisha B'Av. And what that means is that all the other fasts don't have all the other chumras, the other stringencies. The only one that does is Tisha B'Av. And Rashi brings that you have to fast starting by day. In other words, it starts the night before. You're not allowed to wear shoes. So this is only applicable to Tisha B'Av. And Taisus mentions here, no, that's not the meaning. Taisus over here says what it means is that we don't need to fast for rain. And there's no rain fast. They have a lot of rain, so the rain fast didn't apply in Bavel. So it seems like Taisus is saying, but Rashi's emphasizing the fact that the extra stringencies of the fast apply only on Tisha B'Av, and they don't apply on the other fast days. Now, it's possible to translate Taisvis over here to mean that he is talking about the same thing Rashi's talking about, and he's saying that the reason you don't have those stringencies of the fast days in Bavel is because Bavel has a lot of rain, and therefore they don't need to take on such extra stringent fasts because there's enough rainfall. So it never ended up happening that you would need to add on these extra fasts, which would mean that maybe Rashi is basically saying that that in Bavel they don't have to add on these extra stringencies to the rain fasts because there's enough rain. Possibly you could somehow put the two together, Rashi and Tosfos. In any event, this is a statement in the Gemara that doesn't seem to be so connected to the previous discussion. We're talking about fasting, if it's meritorious or not. And here the Gemara sort of like adds in a side point. And now the Gemara goes back and says, what about a scholar? So, Amar Reb Yirmiyah bar Abba, Amar Reish Lakish, Reb Yirmiyah bar Abba says, or Ve'amar Reb Yirmiyah bar Abba, Amar Reish Lakish. So, Ein Talmud Chacham, Rishoi Leishev B'Taanis. Scholar is not allowed to fast. And scholar can't fast because he minimizes in his service of Hashem. It's gonna it's gonna be harder for him to learn. So Rashi says Choloshu, he's weak, he's not able to learn. So basically he shouldn't fast because it's minimizing his job, basically minimizing his work. His main work is Melecha Shemayim, his work of heaven, and he's not doing it properly. Now, Mhm. The the Gemara continues and it says, "Oichlin v'shoisin mishech hashefa." And this is going back on the Mishnah. The Mishnah talked about the three fasts that let's just look back at our Mishnah. Our Mishnah was on page 10a. And on page 10a, it mentioned that the 17th of Cheshvan came. It didn't rain. So the individuals fast three fasts. They eat and drink once it gets, even after it gets dark, they're still allowed to eat and drink, and they're allowed to do work, and they wash, and they anoint themselves with oil. They can wear shoes. They can have relations, and that's the law with the first three fasts that only the scholars fast.
Rabbi?
Then the Mishnah mentions about Rosh Chodesh Kislev, that the whole community fasts, and these other fasts are also fasts that can be done that are similar. They're also light fasts, and they don't apply to the stringencies that we fast on, like Yom Kippur. Yes, Ezra.
A question on the previous, the part where it says "En Talmid Chacham Rashai."
Yeah.
So, I mean, does that mean that someone like I don't know, Rav Eliashiv or any of the Gdolei Ador, they don't fast, or is there a level that of Talmid Chacham that um, are exempt from fasting, or is it something that people don't do nowadays?
Well, I mean, we could talk practically. There are definitely many tzaddikim that fast, and they're Talmidei Chachamim, great scholars. Lubavitcher Rebbe used to fast at least twice a week, as far as I know. Whenever he went to the oil, he would fast. Um, uh, there definitely tzaddikim that would fast a lot. So to explain the Gemara in a practical sense, it probably would mean more like a teacher who is needed to, you know, is on a lower level that maybe it affects them. You know what I mean? There are certain tzaddikim that food doesn't really, their whole eating is only like a spiritual uh, type of thing. Their eating is not helping them or breaking them. It's all about us. It's all whatever they're meant to do to elevate the food. But for the regular person, it could be problematic. I mean, if they're, you see, you don't, back to the extent that like many people eat before davening. Why do they eat before davening? Because you're not able to concentrate. So it's like so such a person shouldn't be fasting. Their chakras is not going to be proper. Their Torah learning isn't going to be proper. Then you got to figure out if their work is going to be. Are they really, are they working for someone else? Is that they doing good? So here it's mentioning a Talmud Chacham is going to minimize his Melecha Shamayim, his service of Hashem, which either means his learning Torah won't be on the highest level, which basically means his quality of his learning is considered bittul Torah. So it's causing him bittul Torah if he doesn't eat. Now, does that apply to certain tzaddikim? No. There's certain tzaddikim that they didn't, not having food didn't affect them at all. But maybe for a regular scholar, yeah, they have a mitzvah. They should be eating a good, decent breakfast, and they should be able to learn properly and thoroughly. There's a concept of a person who you're allowed to be mavatal Talmud Torah to hear the Megillah. So the famous question on that Gemara is not bittul Torah. Listening to the Megillah, that's considered like learning Torah, hearing the Megillah. The answer is that's qualitatively it's bittul Torah, because in quality you could have learned a lot deeper. You're not using your full mind. You're not putting your whole self into it. You're listening to the Megillah Shkayach, but you could learn a lot deeper. You're not, so you're that bittul Torah. So it seems that that's what the meaning would be here, that he's mumayit and he's not able to learn. I mean, Rashi sort of says this. He says, "Eina yachal lomid." He's going to be weak. He's not going to be able to learn. He's sitting there in the base medrash. So he's fasting, but he's sitting there. He's learning. It means in quality. He's not fully there. He could have asked some really good kashas, and his mind is weaker. He's not thinking properly. So could have given some good answers, and he's not. So that's what it would seem to refer to. So I guess every person has to apply it. People would have to apply it, see if it applies to them. Someone doesn't need to. If someone needs to do tshuva, would be another story. Like what about someone who wants to fast for tshuva purposes, and which would seem like that's what it's referring to. So this Talmud Chacham, we're telling him he can't because you have to pick some other way of doing tshuva. But fasting isn't really the appropriate way. There's a big discussion nowadays as well. Nowadays, we are weaker than we used to be. Previous generations, people were much stronger. They were built stronger. And so the thing is that there are many svarim that talk about fasting for a person does this sin, you should fast this and this amount of fasts. So the question that the scholars discussed is that like what about nowadays? Nowadays you can't really fast, so what should you do? So there's different ways. Could you redeem it with money? And that would be a way of doing tshuva. That each fast would be how much money you normally spend on food that day, and that would then you could redeem it with and redeem it with money, or and Tanya brings down in the Geras HaTshuva talks about if you normally need a certain amount of fast to atone for a certain sin. Let's say you did that sin many times. So would a person have to fast? Let's say he's supposed to fast 84 fasts for a certain sin, but he did that sin 10 times. So does he have to fast 840 fasts or just 84? He did the same. If you do it, can you just fast that amount of sin, that amount of fast that's necessary for that sin, or you got to do it each time that you sin? So the conclusion in the Alter Rebbe's Geras HaTshuva is that you fast 3 times 84, and in other words, because three sins, the 3 times that you do it, it makes that sin a much more like through and through. It's like you get a stain 3 times, the stain goes through and through the garment. So here, the sin, even though you did the sin 10 times, but the main atonement is for 3. You atone 3 times, that's considered good enough. And the Alter Rebbe talks about fasting half a day is considered, you could add 2 half a days because there's a concept of fasting for hours. So you could do a half day fast and add it up. But once you do that, don't fast more. The rest of the fast that you want to do for 840 fast, that you don't have to do, but you should redeem it with money. So the Alter Rebbe seems to give you both points. Like he includes both of these elements that you do need to do tshuva with fasting, but because you're so weak, don't fast all 840. Just do 3 of those 84 fasts, and the other 7 times 84 that you will get atonement by redeeming it with money. So this is also like touches on this idea, but which means that the Talmud Chacham needs to atone for his sins as well, but there's a limit. He shouldn't go over. Shouldn't do more because it is going to affect him. Or he should, the Alter Rebbe says you could fast only certain. You could fast half a day. This could be considered a acceptable half a day fast. Of 2 half-day fasts to equal one day fast, and so on, which we'll see later on in the Masechta about Taanis l'shois. Okay. Anyway, so I think that sort of touches on this idea. The Gemara continues, and it says, you eat and drink from when, even after it's dark, you could still eat and drink. Gemara over here is discussing the fact that a person when he accepts upon himself a fast, when does that when does the when does when does it really kick in? And our Gemara will also talk about this concept of fasting for hours, which we'll soon see right here, actually, Misana Lashois. So the Gemara says, Amar Rab Zeira, Amar Rab Zeira, Amar Rav Huna. Zeira says the name Rav Huna, Yochad Shekibal of Taanis. If an individual, meaning here we're just talking about a regular person. It doesn't necessarily mean a scholar. It's a Yachid that accepted an individual. It's not a communal fast. It's an individual accepts on himself the day before. You're supposed to accept on yourself in the mincha prayer. You accept on yourself to fast. So he says, I'm going to ani yoshev b'tainis l'machar. I'm going to fast. I'm going to sit in a fast tomorrow. So he says such a thing. So when does it really kick in? When does tomorrow? What does that mean? So even if he ate and drank the entire night before the day starts, before the morning, the next day he is allowed to fast. And he fasts, and he says the Tfilas Taanis. Now, what is the Tfilas Taanis? So Tfilas Taanis seemingly is the Anenu prayer. So the next day he would be allowed to say the Anenu. Now the Gemara continues, and it says that Lon b'tainisai, if he slept after his fast, so and Einay mispalo shel tainis, he does not daven the anenu prayer the day after. Even though he's still fasting, he's not able to say the Anenu prayer. So the Gemara continues, and it says, in other words, what does this mean? What it means is you fasted, you accepted on yourself a fast, then you ate and drank that night. The next day you're fasting, and you fasted, and you decide, you know what, this is pretty good. I just lost 2 pounds, 3 pounds one day. Let me go to sleep, and I'll fast a little more tomorrow. Continue. So the thing is, he does not say the Anenu prayer. He's not able to take credit for this extra fast. He never accepted it on himself. He's just doing it he's like continuing his fast, but he never accepted it as an official fasting. So the Gemara questions Rav Huna. The Gemara is going to discuss now this statement of Rav Zeira in the name of Rav Huna. The Gemara says, I'm Rav Yosef, Mike's of Rav Huna. So Rav Yosef says, so what does Rav Huna hold? He can't say Anenu the next morning. So the Gemara says, Svirale, Ein Misanin Lashois, does he hold that you cannot fast for hours? And because of that, the next day's fast is not considered acceptable to say Anenu. Or Dilmar, maybe Masanin Lashois, that he could fast for just some hours and not a full day. But Masanin Lashois ain't a maspalel tfilas tainis. But person who does fast for this few hours, it is not able to say the Anenu prayer, which is what they were calling the tfilas tainis, the prayer of a fast day. That you can't do. You could fast. It's considered a fast, but it doesn't have the same strength as a full day fast. So that's the Gemara's question of why can't you say the Anenu prayer the next day? Is it because it's not worth anything that you're fast, or because it is a fast, just not enough to say the Anenu prayer. It's not, it's not a full-fledged fast. So Abaye says, I'm only Abaye. Ravuna really holds that you could fast for just hours, not days. And a person who fasts for hours can even say the tefillas taanis. You normally could say the anenu prayer, even if you're only fasting for hours. But v'shani hacha, but here is different. That the situation is dika shoyz delelya delay kabel alei meikar. He did not accept this new day of fasting from before. It's not enough to be able to say the Anenu prayer. So he didn't accept this on the day before. There's hours in the night that he didn't accept on himself to say this prayer. So it's not considered a strong enough prayer. He didn't, as I mentioned, officially what you're supposed to do by mincha time is accept on yourself, I'm going to fast tomorrow. But here, so he, this guy, what did he do? He stayed and he went to sleep while he's fasting. He wants to get credit for fasting longer. So the thing is, he never accepted it on himself. So therefore, it's not considered enough to say. He can't say Anenu. He didn't accept it on himself. So in other words, what Abaye is saying is this doesn't prove anything about if a person could fast for hours, because really you could fast for just hours, and you could say Anenu fast, but you do have to accept it. You didn't accept it in advance. The Gemara continues, and it says, Mar Ukva Ikla Ginzak. Mar Ukva came to a city called Ginzak, Bo Mine, and they asked him, can you fast for hours or not? So he said, so Leihava Biyade, he didn't have the answer to this question, and didn't have the answer in his hand, literally. But Kankanim shall nachrem. So they said, what about jugs from Goyim? The question was, if you're allowed to use them, they have non-kosher wine in the walls of the jugs. So these kanim are made from cheres, earthenware. And so the question is, would you be allowed, permitted to be used or not? So loy have a they didn't know the answer. So then they asked him, B'mash Shimesh Moshe, how did Moshe Rabbeinu do the avodah in the Mishkan during the Shivas Yimei Hamaluah? So the Gemara says, "Kol Shivas Yimei b'Mashim Moshe Kol Shivas Yimei Hamaluah." How did he do the service over there in the Mishkan the first 7 days? Until Aaron took over. Basically, he was considered the Kohen Gadol, so to speak, for those 7 days. So, what garments did he wear when he did that? He's not a Kohen, but he was considered like the Kohen Gadol. And officially, Aaron and his kids are the only ones who wore those special garments. So Moshe was told to do it. The question is, what garments did he wear? In other words, was he meant to wear the Kohen? Did he wear the Kohen Gadol's garments or not? So the Gemara says, "Lay have a biyade." You didn't know. Ozol v'shal bei medrasha. So Mar Ukva went to the base medrash. So in other words, they asked him all these questions. He didn't know, and he went to the base medrash, and he shoyel. He asked these questions in the base medrash. Amr lay. So they said to him, Hilchos Hamasan L'Shas. The Allah is you do fast. The Mispal and Tfilas Taanis, and you could say Anenu. Hilchos, the Allah is Kakan Shal Nachrim. The drugs of Goyim, Lachas Neim Asur Chodesh Mutar after 12 months are permitted. And then he said, Mashim Joshua goes to Shiva. What did he wear all 7 days? So it says he wore the white garments that, and what does it say? Rav Kahana Masni Becholok Lavan She'en Lo Imra, that did not have a hem or a seam. Okay, we're going to stop here. We'll continue. We'll talk about it a little more tomorrow. Mitzvah Hashem. Zai gesund, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.